In this tutorial, I will teach you how to implement email authentication using Flutter and Firebase. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you have any feedback on the video, please leave a comment. Before we get into the code, let's open up the Firebase console. Once you have the Firebase console open, click Add Project. In the project input email sign-in Flutter. Disable Google Analytics and click Create Project. Once you have the project open the Build drop-down in the left-hand side of the page. Then click Authentication. Once the authentication page has been opened, click Get Started. Once authentication has been set up, enable the email password provider and click Save. Once you have finished, open up the VS Code editor and open up the terminal. Once you have opened up the terminal, run flutter create . Once the project has been created, delete the Windows, Web, Test, macOS, and Linux folders. Once you have deleted those folders, run the Flutterfire config command. If you don't have the Flutterfire CLI installed in your machine, then in the README for the GitHub, I have the link to the documentation on how to download the CLI. Now select the Firebase project we created and select the Android and iOS configuration platforms. After all the platforms have been registered, click Yes on the next prompt so it could automatically apply all the Firebase configuration for you. Once you have initialized Firebase, run the flutter pub add command. Make sure to add all the dependencies that I have on screen. Once you've downloaded all the packages, go to the lib folder. Inside the lib folder, create a new folder called state, and inside of the state folder, create a file called authblock.dart. Then, in the state folder, create a new file called auth_repository.dart. Inside of this file, create a class called authentication repository. This class will contain the authentication logic for the project. We create this abstraction because we want one source of truth for the whole project when it comes to authentication. For example, we have the user stream and we have all of the methods used to authenticate the user and to sign out the user. Now once you finish with the authentication repository, create a new file called auth_event.dart in the state folder. Now this file will have all the classes that contain all the metadata needed to perform all the authentication logic in the block. So what this means is that this file is providing some standard classes for the user experience to use to effectively communicate with the state. As you can see in the file, we have no imports because this is going to be part of the other file, which is the auth block. Now open up the authblock.dart file and make sure to have the authEvent.dart file as a part of this file. Now import the packages for the file and create a class called authblock. This file will handle all the authentication state for the app. We will use dependency injection to get an authentication repository. Now open up the constructor method of the auth block and use the on function provided by block to listen to the events we have provided. Make sure you give the user subscription, and whenever the user has changed, we just push it to the state. Let's add the event listener callbacks, and then let's create some helper methods so the UI logic doesn't have to access their own authentication repository. So finish by adding the close method and unsubscribing from the user subscription. Now close the file and create a new folder inside the lib folder called routes. After you've created the folder, create a new folder called login, and inside of that folder create a new file called main.dart. First, create a new stateful component called login route. Now inside of the class called login route, assign a new static variable called name. This will be used to identify the route when we are navigating to it. Now close the file, and in the routes folder create a new folder called signup. In this folder create a new file called main.dart. Create a new stateful widget called signup route and create a new static variable called name. As with the route before, this will be used to identify this route on navigation. Make sure to import the material.dart and then close this file. Now go back to the routes folder and create a new folder called auth. Inside of this folder, create a file called main.dart. Now create a stateful component called authRoute and create a new static constant called name. This has the same functions as in the routes before. Make sure to import the material library and close this file. And finally, go to the routes folder and create a new folder called main. Inside of this folder, create a file called main.dart. As with all the routes before, create a new stateful component called main route. As like the routes before, import the material library and create a new constant called name. We use the name property in all these routes to identify the different routes for all the navigation. Once you have created all these routes, open the login/main.dart file. This will contain all of the login logic for the app. Create a new global key called scaffold key. Now create a new class called the login route state and initialize it in the login route. This class will act as the single source of truth for the component. Make sure to import the email validator class. This class will contain the email and password for the form. It will also contain the loading state. It will also contain the validating state of the form, and we will also contain the setters for the whole widget. Once you're done creating the login route state, create two text editing controllers, one for the email and one for the password. Make sure they are assigned as late. Let's instantiate them in the init state function, and let's add the listeners to them. The text editing controller class allows us to listen to inputs whenever we change the text. The text editing controller allows us to listen to edits on anything that handles text input. Now create a function called handleSubmit. This will handle setting the load state and authenticating the user using the inputs in the state. Now let's go back to the auth block class and fix all the helper methods we created. Now let's do some basic error handling. For this component, whenever the error comes up, we will just show a snack bar on the page. What a snack bar is just a bottom message that comes up temporarily. For example, if the user hasn't created an account and is trying to log in, we would tell them. Once you're done with the submit function, create two new functions, one called handlePop and one called handleRedirect. These will handle going to the specific pages for the auth flow. Make sure to import the libraries, and let's head over to the widgets. In the scaffold, make sure to link the key to the scaffold key. Now create an app bar and make sure to set the automatically imply leading property to false. This will remove the back button by default. Now let's add a padding for the body, and inside of that padding, create a column. This column will contain all the children for the screen. In that column, create a new padding that will contain the text inputs for the screen. Inside of that padding, create a new column and create a new text field. Make sure to give it the keyboard type of email and provide it with some basic input decoration. Below this text field, we'll add a size box that will separate this text field from the other one. The other text field will contain the password controller and will have the obscure text property as true. This will allow the user to not see the password content. Below the text field, add a new filled button that will be used to submit the form. We add a row inside the filled button's child property because we want the filled button to take up the full width of the parent container. Now below the section that contains the form, add a padding widget. This section will contain the divider that divides the form from the link to the sign-up page. Now below the padding that we just created, add a row. This will actually contain the links to the sign-up page. To create a pressable widget that's not a button, we use the inkwell widget. And make sure that you use the onTap property when using the inkwell. If not, it won't register the click and you won't get the feedback that you expect. Finally, add the floating action button and the floating action button location property on the scaffold. Once you're done with the markdown for the login widget, go up to the top, copy all the markdown, and paste it into the sign up page. Now copy the login route state and paste it into the signup page. Import all the classes that are used and make sure to rename it. Make sure to change around the code so the signup page has different text and uses the different sign up with email function that we provided in the block. Make sure that we don't use the login function that we created in the block because it'll create the same functionality that we did in the login page. Let's also make sure to add the style property to the submit button. Then let's go back to the login page and paste in the styles that we fixed in the submit button, and let's paste it into the style in the submit button in the login page. Now close all the files and go to the auth page. This page will be the landing page for any unauthenticated user. This page will have a link to the login page, a link to the signup page, and some basic content. To achieve this functionality, all we need is just two functions, one that goes to the login route and one that goes to the signup route. To achieve the look we want in the markdown, we wrap the entire content of this view in a safe area. Inside of that safe area, create a container that has a padding, a center alignment, and a child that is a column. Now create a new column. This column will contain all the headers and some of the content for this page. Create a text inside of that column, and now use a size box to separate it from the text below. Below the column we just created, create a new one. This column will serve as a container for all the buttons that will be the links to the login and signup page. Now create a new filled button with the onPress property set to handle login. Now add a size box component to separate the buttons. Below the size box, add a filled button .tonal. What the filled button .tonal is just a secondary filled button that has a different color from the standard filled button. Once you've finished with the auth route, go to the main route. What this route is the screen that the user will see once they are authenticated. This route will display the user's email and also a sign out button. To achieve this functionality, we have to access the user state. We'll do this by using the context.watch function provided by the block library. This allows us to get real-time streams from the auth block. For the markdown, we'll have a column that is nested from a safe area view and a padding. This will be the wrapper for all the content. Inside of this column, add another column that will contain the user's email. Now under the column we just created, create a filled button that will be the sign out button. Assign the onPress property to handle sign out and give it some basic styles. Once you're done with the main route, go to the lib folder and create a new file called root.dart. Once you have the file open, create a new stateless widget called root state. Inside of this widget, add a new multi-block provider. The multi-block provider is basically a widget that handles all of the different providers for the different blocks. So instead of nesting multiple blocks, you just have one big multi-block provider. Because we only have one block, we don't need that much complexity. Under the root state, create a new stateless widget called root. This component will contain the router for the app. For this project, I used the Go Router package because it allows me to have page transitions and it allows me to handle the complexity of my application as it grows. The first route will be the auth route. Inside, add a redirect method that will check if the user is null. If the user isn't null, we just redirect to main. Now add a page builder function and nest it with a custom transition page. This will take care of the route animations. Make sure to add the key property to the custom transition page and add a transition duration. Because the auth route has two routes nested inside of it, we will provide it with a new routes array that will contain the login route and the sign up route. Now copy the page builder we provided for the auth route and paste it into the new login route. Once that's done, all you need to do is change the auth route to login route. Once you're done creating the login route, copy and paste it down in the same routes array and create it as the signup route. Change the path, the name, and the child in the custom transition page. Now finally, just provide each custom transition page with a void. Below the auth route, create a new route containing the main route. Provide a name, a path, a redirect function that checks if the user is null, and if it is null, then we just redirect it to the auth page. Below the redirect function, paste in the page builder from the auth route. Exchange the auth route with the main route, and that's all we need for the router. Below the router, let's add a material app.router. Once you're done, just close the file. Now open up the main.dart and erase all the default markdown that Flutter has provided for us. In the main function, provide the widget flutter_binding.ensureInitialize function. This ensures that all the native code that Flutter has to run to get the engine going is already run. Now just initialize the Firebase app. In the run app function, provide the root state that we created earlier. Now close the file and go to the runner in VS Code and just press the button that says run and debug. If VS Code asks you what type of runner configuration you want, just click Dart and Flutter. Before you run the app, ensure that you have an iOS simulator or an Android simulator open. Once it is open and it's running, it should take a few minutes and it should launch. As you can see, it's up and running. Let's click login and you can see that the login page is open. In the email address form field, let's just provide a test email. And add a random valid password. If we try to log in, you can see that it says an error on the bottom. Now go to the sign up page and provide the same details and create an account. It should take you to the You're Signed In As page, and you should see a sign out button. Click it and go back and log in using the same details. As you can see, it's successfully logged in.